And we have started streaming. Everything is looking good so far. No dropped frames. Hello, hello, everyone. It is time for the March live stream. I'm here with Chris as usual, but we've got a new face in Yuri with the hammer and sickles. Hello, Yuri. Why don't you tell us about yourself while the chat catches up?
Hello, I am a Christian apologist, hard Marxist. I guess I'll guess a few of my philosophical positions. Moral particularist, don't believe in any objective morality. Atheist, agnostic atheist, don't see any convincing reasons for the existence of God. Monarchist, but I don't look forward to debating that tonight since those conversations are too long and too taxing.
Well, you're in charge. We'll debate whatever you want to debate. So, hello, SKM.
No. This is your show, so feel free to engage. I will say this before any debates are had. If we have any disagreements, on my end, I'll keep it civil. On my end, I try not to interrupt unless I feel like there might be a mischaracterization. So if you feel like I'm mischaracterizing your argument in any way, shape, or form, or you feel like I'm going on a straw man, or you feel like I'm derailing, or you think I'm having a red herring, or any one of these, any of those issues that I previously mentioned, feel free to interrupt me and quickly put me back on track. That happens sometimes, especially in longer conversations. That being the case, I think we should go point by point. And typically, yeah, maybe we'll have a good conversation.
Maybe. I mean, my point of view of this is a benefit for the supporters, and if you pay to come in, then you're kind of, I'll do what you want. I want you to get your money's worth.
Right. I mean, we try to get more people besides me and Shane. The problem is that real life keeps getting in the way for everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm here tonight, and I have a bottle of booze in case this goes south, so I'm ready.
Yeah, like Laser Pig in that one video. Yeah, he was doing Laser Pig's YouTuber. He mostly does military history, and he did a controversial video where he was trying to show that the T-34 tank was not the great tank that a lot of tankies think it is, and he did this joke where it's like, okay, I'm going to need to get some medicine to help me do this. And granted, it's animated because he doesn't show his real face. He had his pig character go up and come back with a giant glass of wine. Okay, now I'm ready to explain my point.
I will say this.
SKM wants to know our opinion on the Sweet Baby Inc. hullabaloo, which I have no idea what he's talking about. So that's my opinion.
So Sweet Baby Inc. Granted, because I was reading about this because a lot of my YouTubers I watch were reviewing this. So Sweet Baby Inc. was contrary to popular belief, it's not a game developer. Rather, it's a consultation firm. And basically, people were paying them to write their stories and all that. And basically, they were putting social justice warrior messages in it. Now, that's not too much of a problem on its own. The problem was that it turns out that the people who found it, they have connections, and they have been caught in interviews saying if a company says we don't want SJW messages in our stories, they'd use their connections to basically silently cancel you, by saying the usual.
All due respect, I probably agree with you on your positions, but I hated that era of YouTube.
That's where a lot of it just went downhill. Things were much better before then.
I think it might just be because, and to be fair, even we were tired about because it literally came I don't know when it happened. Maybe it happened and we just didn't realize it, but at least from my personal opinion, it literally came from nowhere. Literally, it seems like I just woke up and one day I'm hearing so and so actor's getting fired because he said a raunchy joke and all this, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, it just seemed like there was a tipping point of that kind of element of wanting to shut people up for not being politically correct. That's been there for decades, but somehow I guess around maybe 2017, 2018. It kind of hit this tipping point where all of a sudden it was all throughout academia. It was all throughout Silicon Valley, which had traditionally been quite libertarian. You know,
Yeah.
and all of
So
a
like
sudden it was
my
just everywhere.
my understanding about a lot of the content creators and this is why I like really hate it. I found that like a lot of the people who like participated in the anti SJW craze back in YouTube, for example, like Sargon of Akkad, Nick Fuentes before he got banned, Just a Robot, less so with the Amazing Atheist, but he'll admit that he was more right leaning back then at this point. A lot of these people essentially, you might even be familiar with Sargon, Shane, but like a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of these people essentially became fascist. Sargon now just all I see him doing now is talking about black IQs and cranial sizes. So I don't know. Like it seemed like it was a very. I kind of suspected at the time that this kind of fishy like behavior would essentially escalate to that point, and lo and behold, it did.
Yeah, that's what
A lot of
happens. It pushes people to the extreme. It's just like we saw during COVID, and I called they were pushing the vaccines and the vaccine mandates. The more they were going to just spur on the anti-vaccination movement. You have people who were completely rational before now getting behind people like Andrew Wakefield and Joseph Mercola and RFK
Mm.
Jr.
And speaking of people who I used to like that have fallen, I saw like a recent video with Penn Jillette. That guy has fallen from grace badly.
all right.
He's no longer a libertarian. He said in an interview that he partially blames libertarianism for why Trump got into power because
Yeah.
he said our freedom to choose bit us in the butt. I don't know
Yeah,
what
that
happened
was it.
to
It was TDS that got him.
yeah.
So Shane, all right. So I have a few topics in mind. Right. If you're interested, I will
Sure.
say beforehand, you and like this other what's your name, Scarface. You guys seem to agree on probably almost like majority of y'all's positions. So I am one user on your stream. I would prefer if like it is hard to talk to two people at once, especially when they make two different points. I've been on these type of streams before, and that has happened. So I'd be more than happy to respond to either one of you if y'all have questions or we have counterpoints. But try to like understand that I am one individual and I can get bulldozed, especially by two individuals. So
We try our best not to pile on, but it doesn't
Yeah.
always work out that way.
Honestly, on the rare cases where there is a debate, I'm actually pretty quiet because Shane's a little bit better at this than I am. So
I
because
view myself as really good at this. So
because I have autistic spectrum, and so I have difficulty reading social cues in the room. So I have a habit of trying to say something, and then while someone's in the middle of talking, and then they stay quiet, to let me speak, but I just stay silent because I'm like, oh, I interrupted, and they're like, no, no, say something. And I'm like, what?
So Shane, before we get this started, are you familiar with a user named Jack Gangstrike?
That does not ring any bells.
Okay, then like fair enough. It was just a user I knew, and you guys like remind me of like each other. You guys debate in a very similar way and similar topics. But the only difference is you're a libertarian, and he's a full blown Marxist. So it's like
Wow.
you guys are like it's like he's like Darth Shane, right? You can think about him like that, right?
The
But
anti-me. We
yeah,
should
like,
not. We should not
essentially.
ever be together in the same room because if we come into contact, we'll cancel each other out as matter and antimatter and blow up the planet.
Yeah, well, an unstoppable force versus like an immovable object. That's what you guys are.
Yeah.
Essentially, I think you guys are both really intelligent. So I guess you talk about theology. I know a lot. I see that you probably have like more of a passion for that, as well as economics, as well as philosophy. So I have a few topics. I'm not trying to talk about economics here today, as I feel like if I'm going to have that conversation, that's going to be a conversation in and of itself, and those usually last forever because it's more that you're usually debating mathematics at a certain point. Which I do not have the brain capacity.
No, you want conversations to go on and on. Wait till Fourth Root comes in here and he and Shane start talking about science.
Got it.
Or in fairness, Chris, when you and I get on about the Civil War.
Yeah, true. I'm like a really big history buff, so.
So I believe. Okay, you think the Crusades are unjustifiable?
Yep.
Okay, I don't. I think the Crusades were justified. Now, what do we take justification? We're talking about in the context of this, the First Crusade, correct?
Any of them.
That's kind of
massive,
weird.
violations of the non-aggression principle. They don't pass even basic ethical muster.
Okay, so like when you're saying like
And
any crusade,
even if you say that everything they were saying about the Arab world was true, which by and large it wasn't, it was propaganda, but even if we take every single claim they made as absolutely true, still not justified.
so the Sixth Crusade was not even, there was no fighting in that. There was an exchange. Jerusalem was handed over via like a transaction, right?
Well,
So
Jerusalem's been
there's no
handed
fight.
over so many times. I don't think
Well,
anybody
yeah,
can
but
keep
like
up.
but when we say that any of these crusades, we have to like be talking about like specific ones. These are over the course of like at least 3, maybe 400 years, right? These crusades start. So it's not fair to like lump them all into like one category. But I feel like for the purpose of this, we're talking about the most impactful one and arguably with the most barbaric, the first, correct?
Sure.
Okay, cool. So when you say it's unjustified, what do you take justification to be?
Well, at the very least, you have to pass muster with the non-aggression principle. Within that bound, there is a whole universe of things that's allowed by the non-aggression principle. But as soon as you step over that line, yeah, when you look at just the absolute barbarism, the murderousness, the war of it, none of it's justified.
Okay. Correct.
I don't want to single
Question.
that out because I say that about practically any war or anything like that. So.
Would you say that the Ally invasion of World War II of Germany was unjustified?
A lot of it was.
So when you say a lot of it, are you talking about the concept of invading Nazi Germany
I'm
itself?
talking about anything that goes beyond defending the rest of Europe from Germany, and even like working within Germany, like the German resistance directly against the aggression of the Nazis. All of that was justified.
Okay, so you'd even agree that like if you have to kill like enemy civilians in order to secure your own country's safety, right, from like the aggression of the
Uh,
Nazis.
that would be killing enemy civilians. That's where it gets really sticky. Because if they're non-combatants, what's your justification?
That you might not have a choice to do so otherwise. Like if you have like a enemies like a platoon of enemies in a given region, and you have to bomb that region to like most effectively kill them, that might result in civilian casualties. Would you be okay with taking that risk or
Nope.
opportunity?
I'll point you to War, Peace, and the State by Murray Rothbard for the a bigger write-up on the ethics of that. But
Okay, so when we're talking,
the weapons themselves aren't even justified in their existence because for that very reason they cannot be pinpointed specifically against aggressors.
okay,
Not
cool.
like
So
guns or even like, Stinger missiles, grenades, stuff like that. You can pinpoint those against aggressors, but a bomb that's going to destroy like 5 city blocks, unless that
okay,
happens to be, like a military base or something where they all are, that wouldn't be justifiable.
okay, so just okay. So when we're talking about just trying to map out your positions and where you stand on things, right? Uh, just so we're clear, when we're talking about the Crusades, we're not justified. Are we talking about the idea of what the spawned the first Crusade itself, like it in an abstract sense, right? Or like the actions
Yeah,
that took place?
it's basically we agree, we believe a certain thing. We're going to go force people to believe that thing, and if they don't, we kill them.
That was not the notion of
That's
Crusade.
basically the idea when you boil it down. When you get past all the propaganda and when you get past all of the, highfalutin language to try to justify it, that's basically what it was.
But no, it really wasn't. You're conflating like actions that took place, and here's the issue, right? You'd agree that like the idea of invading Germany to stop German aggression in and of itself, that idea is good. But actions that take place in that war, despite what the ideals may be, right, might not be might not be justified, right? So there's a disconnect, it seems, between the concept or the idea of spawning something versus actions that take place within the
It's
war
the
itself.
difference between defensive force and initiating force. That's the
Uh,
distinction.
explain what you mean by that.
To explain what I mean by defense versus initiation, I would hope I don't have to.
I think it's
Uh,
important because by defense, like you're talking about, okay, then like you're saying that the invasion of Germany would be justified because you're stopping a German aggression on the rest of Europe, correct?
I if
By
I
that
could
logic, I'd say that by that logic, in concept, I'd say that the First Crusade would be justified.
um if I could add my 2 cents in here, I think what Shane's views are is like if Germany invades another nation without invades another nation like France or something, yeah, France and maybe and to a lesser extent her allies have every right, to mobilize, a defense force to defend themselves from German aggression. The thing when it goes too far is when you repel Germany out of all your lines, but then you decide, oh no, we got to take this war to Berlin. We got to storm Berlin and make Hitler surrender. That's when you're violating the non-aggression
Yeah,
principle.
and we got to bomb the shit out of Dresden and so on.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, right? When we're also talking about like what should be applied in these situations, are we also talking about like what realistically can be implemented, or are we talking about in an ideal scenario?
Well, the problem with that is, now I never served in the military, but I watch a lot of those military YouTubers, and anyone can tell you the biggest reason why, and this is why we have things like the McNamara fallacy, is that wars are very unpredictable, they're very complex, and there's many and there's a lot of political conflicts that can go back centuries that go into a war. So the sad reality is that it doesn't behave the way you might think it might do.
Well, I mean, in principle, we can agree that if there's a whole bunch of troops invading your town and you have to defend yourself, you might accidentally kill a a peaceful person in the process. You know what they would call collateral damage, and the moral blame for that would be on the invaders, not on you. The problem is, as we've seen, the military just does that. They've got a small group of people and they bomb an entire town and they go, oh, well, that's just collateral damage. You got to expect that in war. And they just use it as an excuse.
Yeah, okay, then we can talk about like that particular scenario, but I think we agree that like sometimes unintended consequences are going to happen as a result of war. Not everything will play out idealistically, and we have to account for those like unidealistic situations.
Well, and you also have to account for it when you start the war.
Yeah,
because you have to go in, say, oh, well, we didn't know that was going to happen. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
Well, yeah, I'd assume you're a libertarian, so you don't believe anyone has a justified reason to aggress someone else. So, okay, then I'd say in concept, the First Crusade would be justified by that idea.
On what grounds?
You know what kickstarted the First Crusade?
Tell us.
I was asking if I'm guessing you're not, which is fine. But
I want your point of view on it.
About 1071, the Byzantine Empire is invaded by the Seljuk Turks. They lose a battle named Manzikert. Seljuk Muslim Turks are invading into Anatolia, killing and destroying a lot of Byzantine towns. The Byzantine Empire is on its knees because not only did they just lose the Battle of Manzikert, in the 1080s, the Normans launched an invasion force into Greece and Bulgaria, which drained the empire dry of its resources. The Byzantine emperor at the time, Alexios Komnenos, asks the Pope for a decree of help, which is military aid to take back a lot of the Christian lands that were lost from the Seljuk Turks, and essentially get military aid because the Turks are encroaching on Constantinople.
Okay, so what I heard was you got one bunch of violent psychopaths who beat up on another bunch of violent psychopaths, and then a third group of violent psychopaths got involved. That's basically what all of that was.
How did you take that from what I said?
Well, I mean, you said it yourself with the word empire, didn't you? Isn't that what an empire is? A ruling class? A ruling class full of violent thugs that bends the people to their will, and then other people say, hey, we want to be the ones to rule those people against their will, so we'll go and beat up on them. And they go, no, we're the ones who get to beat up on those people against their will, so we're going to beat up back on you, and so on. Morally, that's what it is.
Well, the Byzantine Empire, the reason it gets the name empire is because, are you familiar with what the Byzantines were?
Why don't you tell us? This is about your point of view.
Okay, cool. So, well, I'm asking you because I'm assuming this is a dialogue back and forth, but if you're not, that's fine. Byzantine Empire, a remnant of the old Roman Empire that spawned in the year 86 BC, and continued on from Augustus to the end with Constantine the 11th. Byzantine Empire is a remnant of that. So at this point, what you'd call the Byzantine Empire, the reason it gets the term empire is because it's a remnant of that government that was spawned 1,000 years ago. So when you say that they are aggressing on other people who didn't choose to be, well, that could be the case from the beginning or the get-go of the empire. But at this point, that the empire had held these territories for the last 1,100 years, and most of everyone in that country called themselves Roman. So I don't think that the argument here really works.
But how are they any less of a ruling class?
You'd have to provide that, right? You'd have to
I might point you to pretty much any of the videos from Lark and Rose about this. You know,
well,
about the very nature of what a ruling class is.
Well, even if it's run by a ruling class, you would still say that the Byzantine Empire, right, has the right to defend itself if an invading enemies approach it.
No, only individuals have the right to defend themselves. There is no Byzantine Empire. There is no thing. That's an abstraction. That's not a thing that exists. There's people, and there's a bunch of people who say that we're the government and we get to rule over everyone else.
When
so
you say
there is no, quote unquote Byzantine. That's not a thing that exists. That's an abstract concept.
So when you say that like the Byzantine Empire doesn't exist, what do you mean by that? You're saying that like abstract concepts don't exist?
Right, because they're abstract concepts. That's the definition of an abstract concept. That's the whole. That's what an abstract concept is. It doesn't actually exist. They're just a bunch of people. They're just people. That's all it is.
So
just people, and no person has the moral authority to rule over someone else.
So that's not what an abstract concept means.
Okay, why don't you tell us what it means?
An abstract concept does not mean a concept that doesn't exist, or else it couldn't be conceptualized. And an abstract concept means that it doesn't exist. It only exists epistemically, and so far that it doesn't have or exist in ontology or in the real world, right? It exists in a way that like can clarify, translate, and even predict things in the real world, like mathematics, but it doesn't exist physically. It doesn't have a physical corporeal form. So you saying that it doesn't exist?
But I'm talking in the context of what we're talking about. When we're talking about moral actors, only individual humans are moral actors. There's no like Byzantine Empire that is its own moral actor. There's just a bunch of people.
Okay, so
and whether those people are LARPing as a ruling class or whether they're just, the peasantry trying to go about their day, they're still individuals.
Okay, cool. So you're saying that like the Byzantine Empire doesn't exist. So I'm going to need like the justification for that, because your initial justification was it's an abstract concept and it doesn't exist in reality. Like we already clarified that abstract concepts can exist and comport with reality and do exist, right? So I'm going to need the justification for that. This thing is non-existent.
We didn't agree on any such thing.
Well, you said yes to what I said, and you said, but in the context of this, X, Y, and Z.
No, I was just pulling us back to the concept of what we were talking, because you were getting far afield of what we were talking about. We're talking about, like, I can, put a funny hat on there and say, I am the, Grand Poobah Schmearmere, and you all must follow me, and if you don't, I'll beat up on you. And if no one else agrees with me, then everyone just ignores me as a lunatic. But if I can just convince enough people to agree with me and they agreed to beat up on everyone else on my behalf, then I guess that's your abstract reality, but it doesn't give me any greater, it doesn't put any greater morality behind my actions than when I was just some guy in a silly hat.
Oh, can I ask, are you live streaming on YouTube?
Oh yeah, YouTube, Odyssey, and Rumble.
Oh yeah,
at the same time.
So like, sorry, I'm gonna cut the debate off for a quick second. I'm just gonna send my friend a link to this because he asked to.
Okay.
He asked to watch. So my bad for.
I'll catch up on some chats then.
I just sent him the thing, so you can feel free to answer as many as you need. We can come back to this. But
let's see, SKM, you'd have to think of every other method you can use, before you can resort to indiscriminate bombing, only when you have no other options. Hey, Sid, sorry you couldn't join us. They could have been justified in trying to repel the invaders. However, there were so many unjustifiable atrocities they committed along the way, for example, against the Jews in Europe. Yep.
Well, I can't talk about that because Shane doesn't believe that they were even justified in trying to repel the invaders. So I have to.
I believe that individuals were.
Is the government
I
not
said
ran
that.
by
I said
individuals?
that at the start.
Is the government not ran by individuals?
The government is individuals.
So they're justified.
The individuals are justified when they act in defense.
And that's what the Byzantine Empire was doing.
I don't get how.
Well, I told you, the Seljuks invaded and they tried to repel the invasion. But
okay, but how does that justify the Crusades?
Because that's what kickstarted the Crusades. That was the Crusades.
No, the Crusades were not just the Byzantines defending themselves.
That was a huge part of it.
That was kind of the justification for it, but it went way, way, way beyond that.
So this is the issue that like you're going to run into, and I knew we would run into this issue when you say that like X event like the Crusades is not justified, right? There's many different players and there's many different like pawns in an event like this, right? This is like when you say, is the U.S. a justified state? Well, it depends on like what you're talking about in that context. So like what specific institution or individuals are we talking about?
Well, so, no state is justified, but that's
well, we can get into that, right? But when you say that the Crusades were not justified, this was the notion and the idea of the Crusades. So
the notion and the idea of Crusades was to try to force Christendom on the Islamic world. That was the stated goal of it. I don't know how you can try and worm it into anything else. They were using the attack on the Byzantines as a justification. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to ask because like I mentioned this in the comic section. I don't believe that the Crusades were justified. But I'm kind of in the field like I don't know if I've been watching this guy called Metatron a lot lately, and I've been trying to apply. I've been trying to avoid using presentism when I review historical events, and I'm just wondering where did they state that the Crusades were about forcing the Muslims to do that, because I've been watching a lot of documentaries by people who actually study European history, and most of them generally do say that. Now, granted, this is argument of authority, but it's a lot of them, and they were showing actual documents showing the primary reason for the First Crusade. This is the First Crusade, not the other ones. That's a different debate for another day. They were about protecting the Byzantine Empire and the Eastern churches from the Seljuk Turks.
Seljuk, yeah.
Yeah, where did you hear that they said that their stated goal was no? This is actually about forcefully converting.
Because that was actually like I said, because they went way beyond just merely defend. They didn't just send the troops into the Byzantine Empire along the border and say you shall not pass. They were saying look at this. This is proof that these Muslims are horrible, evil people. And they weren't just repelling the invaders.
So
they went way beyond that.
Like when you're talking about cities like Antioch, right, or you're talking about cities outside of Anatolia, for one, the Byzantine Church did own cities like Antioch. But if you're talking about cities like Jerusalem, that's another subject. But we're talking about the Crusades in concept. The Crusade in concept was about self-defense. But before we get on to like the
I don't
next
get
stuff,
how you can claim self-defense by going to a completely different land and killing people.
Because like you agree that like during like situations of conflict, things that can happen outside of the intended like result or like idea can happen, right?
I do not agree that it is justified to go anything beyond what is necessary for defense. And none of that was necessary for defense of anyone, not the Byzantines, not anyone else.
If someone steals your home, do you have the right to go back in there and kick them out?
Yes, but I don't have the right to go shoot up their neighbors.
Oh, okay, cool. So as far as like when it comes to invading the Seljuk Muslims and all that, we can establish that that territory was previously owned by Christians.
It was previously owned by people. It doesn't matter if they were Christians or what.
Christians. Okay, so
Yeah,
I
you
feel
say
like
like
now
the
we're gonna.
people who used to live here, like someone who used to live in this house 100 years ago was a Christian. You're not, so I'm going to kill you, and toss your body out of the house and have some Christians move in.
Okay, so now I feel like we'll come back to this, but I feel like a better, because like we disagree fundamentally on like moral epistemology. So I feel like now we talk about like the non-aggression principle
Yeah,
and
and I
various other
just want
things.
to get a few from Mr. No before we do that. He says, it was a big factor in the Crusades. Most of the Western European kingdoms wouldn't enter the Middle East unless they would get something out of it, and the Byzantine emperor offered them treasure and land. The Crusader kings and lords took the opportunity to conquer land in the Middle East against the emperor's wishes.
Oh yeah, that did happen.
Yeah.
But like we're talking about like the kickstart. So now we're going to talk about like moral philosophy. Give me 1 second. Okay, so justify. So you think that like morality is objective, correct?
To an extent, yeah. It's probably more accurate to say that ethics are objective.
By ethics, you mean the
Kind of
laws that govern morality.
depending on how you define the terms, I guess.
I understand ethics and morality can be used interchangeably, but when there's a distinction, it's usually in reference to ethics are the laws that govern moral code, while morals are the things that exist with individual ethical laws.
Well, I'm thinking more along the distinction of ethics is about how people treat other people, but morality is just about how you live your life. So if you're just doing things like, if you believe it's immoral to drink alcohol and you just don't drink alcohol, that's fine. But then if you say, I'm going to force everyone else to not drink alcohol, there you have a problem.
Yeah, okay. So so you're saying it's objectively wrong to force other individuals to not drink alcohol, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so by what do you mean by objective? Which is external to the human mind, that exists mind independently?
It follows by a universally applicable set of internally consistent logic.
What the fuck does that mean?
That I laid it all out in Libertarianism and Property Rights from First Principles. You follow logical principles step by step, from the start, from the first principles to the conclusion.
Yeah, I get
and
it.
as long as you haven't made any logical mistakes along the way, as long as you haven't skipped any steps or made any logical errors, then you have a justified conclusion.
Yeah, I get it. That's your moral philosophy and that's your moral syllogism. But I'm asking you for the definition of objective here.
I mean, that it's objective in the same way 2 + 2 = 4 is objective.
Yeah, but I'm asking you, what does objective mean?
It means that anyone should be able to follow that same logic and get to the same conclusions.
So anyone should be able to follow that same logic and follow that same conclusion is what objective means.
Right. It's just kind of like if you have a proof in geometry and you follow through it, and then someone in India could read what you did, follow through it, and come to the same conclusion.
Okay, right. So two people, right, follow a train of logic that homosexuality is immoral because biologically it's not necessary for reproduction, and as such, we should not allow homosexuality, right? Since both of them had a train of
you'd have the problem.
Hold on.
Well, hold on,
Both of them
because you've
followed
got a problem right there, because who says that biologically necessary for production is a moral principle?
Well, I don't. This is your criteria.
No, it's not, because you're not starting
Well,
from
no,
first
it-
principles. You're not
well,
starting
no,
from.
you're-
You're not starting from the consistency principle, law of non-contradiction, excluded middle, law of identity, stuff like that. You're not starting with the basic principles of logic and following them to a conclusion.
Well, that wouldn't exactly matter because the criteria that you listed for objectivity would be that two individuals can follow a chain of logic and reach the same conclusion.
Right, starting
So,
from basic logical principles.
Well,
Otherwise, you're
okay,
not
what is
using
logic?
logic.
What's logic?
Oh God.
Well, no, this you think this is a oh god, but like the problem here is that the definitions you're using, no one else uses, right? So
No,
you have a
I
really
am
weird
using
thing to say.
logic the way people have used the term for thousands of years.
Do you think that like when people say or define things like objectivity, do you think most philosophers, especially in like a philosophy class or in academia, are going to define objectivity by that which most people can follow a train of reasoning and come to the same conclusion?
I think that is exactly, what people have said, because but that's the whole point of like science. That's how we, have confidence in a scientific conclusion, not because just one person did it, but because it was repeatable by people who were making sure that the methodology was correct, maybe even who started off disagreeing with the conclusion, replicated things, and got the same result.
So
That's objectivity, as opposed to
um,
subjectivity, which is of the individual opinion.
so the thing is that like the problem is no one uses that criteria for objectivity. Objectivity just simply means that which is mind independent, right? Like this is what I'm trying to get us on, right? So when I ask what things like logic are, things like logic,
Wait,
the
wait,
only
wait,
way,
wait. Mind independent?
yes,
Minds came up with logic. So how can logic be independent of minds if you need minds to do logic?
that's an epistemic question. But before I like answer that, I will.
Reality is mind independent.
Um,
The way things are in the universe.
so when you say that things are mind independent, what you're saying when you say objective, that things are true, right? Proof is that which comports with reality. And when you're saying that things are objective, you're saying that they're true, like disregarding, right, whether or not like you need a mind to process it, right? So you could argue that like that there are debates about this. Now, I personally do hold the idea that like math is not objective in the way that you might think it is. I think it's an axiom, right? But I think that like things like there's a tree outside my yard, right? That would be true even if there wasn't any agents to process or look at the tree, right? It wouldn't be dependent on their mind. So when you say things like logic, the issue is that logic is either an axiom, and it's usually we accept it to be objective. So you need to like you can't define like logic, or you can't define
Well, no,
objectivity.
you accept the first principles of logic. But like
So
I said, non-contradiction, law of identity, excluded middle.
are those principles objective?
Yeah, they're very well established.
But you just said that like you determine objectivity by logic.
Yeah.
So
This seems like it's going dangerously close to creationist territory. Oh, well, mine's just made up logic, and that's why it's not objective, and therefore God exists. I've had people make that argument.
I'm not a creationist.
I know, but it sounds like it's getting dangerously close to that territory.
You're talking about presuppositionalism, right?
Yeah.
But like I am a presuppositionalist, but not in the theistic sense, but more of a foundationalist, if you know what that is. But the thing I was going to talk to you about, so you can't you have an issue here where like your definitions and your idea of things are circular. You define logic is dependent on objectivity. Logic is objective, but objectivity is also dependent, and the criteria for understanding objectivity is based on logic. So you have a situation where both are based on each other, and both are using self-referential definitions for each other. So we need to define like clearly your definitions here don't exactly work properly because there's some inconsistency here.
Well, because I'm trying to do this without going into a several hours long treatise, I could just point you to Raymond Smullyan instead.
We could just get clear definitions on these things. Like it's not that hard.
I mean, it's generally accepted that, you start with, and of course these are very well established in other ways, but it's just well established that if you want to start with logic, you start with those principles.
Here,
and work from there step by step to get to your conclusion.
To let you know, I'm not bullshitting here when I talk about like objectivity is that which is mind independent. I just like did a quick Google search, and They define it like this: in philosophy, objectivity is the concept of truth being independent from the individual's subjectivity, bias caused by one's perception, emotions, or imagination. Right, that which is mind independent. I can send you a link to this, and I will send it. Look in live stream planning if you want a source for this.
I mean,
can
I
get other
agree with
sources.
that definition, but that's not what I would think about being mind independent.
Mind that what else do you
Because you're everything we're doing is a result of mind. Everything we're discussing is the result of mind. Everything we establish, all of the laws of mathematics and everything, that's the result of mind.
Well, no,
All of the
it's
laws of physics that we've come up with to understand the universe is a result of mind.
not really.
It is. It's the result of a lot of
So
minds working very, very hard for thousands of years to try to find as much objective truth as we can.
so we understand that a mind is needed to process this information, but when we say mind independent, we understand that these things can exist despite like a mind existing or not.
Well,
Do you think that
it's independent of individuals' point of view. Basically, the definition you read out was fine.
well, that was the definition I was using, but you seem to take an issue with it. But it's fine. It's
No,
whatever.
I just took an issue with the term mind independent because it kind of makes it seem like logic is this Star Trek energy being that's out there floating around somewhere independent of any of us, and that's not
Okay.
it.
So, all right. So when we're saying that, like, I guess we can get into the nitty gritty of this and like stop doing semantics. So I think like both of us are not getting anywhere. Okay. So why is me robbing you objectively wrong?
Well, what happens if I rob you back?
You do it. You rob me.
Okay. So then how do you justify robbing me in the first place if I can just rob you back?
I want something. That's my justification.
Okay, what if I stop you from robbing me by pointing a gun at you?
I'd say that you'd also be justified in that.
But how can we both be justified when that's a contradictory thing?
It's not a contradictory thing.
It is, because we both want, if I want this water bottle, I have this water bottle, you want the water bottle, you want to take the water bottle from me, and I want to keep the water bottle. Both of those things cannot be the proper result. It's one or the other. Either I own this water bottle and I can stop you from taking it from me, or you are justified in taking the water bottle from me. If you are justified in taking the water bottle from me, I am not justified in stopping you from taking the water bottle from me.
You're conflating
both of those things cannot be justified.
You're conflating outcome versus justification.
No, I'm talking about justification.
No,
both of those things cannot be.
Both
of those things cannot be justified. If you are justified in taking the water bottle, I am not justified in stopping you from taking the water bottle. The only way I can be justified in stopping you from taking the water bottle is if you are not justified in taking the water bottle in the first place.
Your only example.
Otherwise, you have a contradiction.
No, your only example for why this can't be the case is that the outcome of like the situation, it can't be both true that I take the water bottle and you stop me from taking it, right? Which is talking about the outcome of the situation. Yeah, the outcome.
No, I was just talking about the basic principle of the situation, the property rights of the water bottle.
Well, no, like because like I just agreed that like you can be justified in wanting to stop me based on you wanting to keep your property, and I can be justified in the sense that I want your property, right? These two competing ideas aren't like contradictory at all. In fact, they can't exist.
But they are contradictory because they can't both be the case at the same time.
Yeah, they can.
And if a third party decides to also defend my rights to my water bottle and stop you from doing it, do you have any justification in saying that they cannot stop you?
Yeah, I do have a justification in saying that. Wait, hold on. Ask me the question again.
If someone else wants to defend my right to my water bottle and then they stop you.
Yeah, I could say that they're justified.
Okay, then you're not justified in taking the water bottle because otherwise they wouldn't be justified in stopping you.
No, because like my justification is my own, right? So like I'm justified in the sense that like I want your property and I would prefer that I have it. They're justified in saying I want to keep my property, right? And as such, I will defend my property, right? These two like justifications are different.
But it's who is justified in having the water bottle?
Well, like you're the
Objectively, you are talking about a subjective standard. You want the water bottle. I have the water bottle. You say you can get it. I say you can't. You are talking subjectively. I am talking objectively.
well, like here's the thing.
Objectively, who is justified in having the water bottle?
Well, that's your burden to prove, right? Because I believe that morality is subjective. I have no reason to believe that morality is objective. You're making the claim that subjective morality is wrong, and that morality exists mind independently or objectively. So that's your burden to prove, not mine.
Chris says we're getting off track. You want to come to the mic and say how?
I don't think we're getting off track, but
I just, to be honest,
you're popping out, Chris.
I'm just kind of lost because, like, I thought we were talking about the Crusades and we are talking about,
we moved on from that. We agreed to move on.
Yeah, we left that subject behind. Okay. We'll let the listeners decide for themselves on that one.
I probably missed it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I already stated this in the comments. I'll admit, on the subject of historical battles like the Crusades, because like I'm still an individualist and I am for the most part anti-war, but when you really think about it, you kind of got to remember this was a different time back then. They didn't have guns. They didn't have a lot of modern tools that we have that really help us become individuals. They were a much more primitive society. So, like I said, I'm not justifying the Crusades, but I can easily see why people back then made the decisions they did. I don't have to approve of it, but I understand it.
Yeah, that doesn't mean they were right to do it.
Here's a good quote from Ryan Macbeth. I like to bring up.
Well, hold on. We could get back to this, but I do want to continue about the moral philosophy because Shane, like in all fairness, this philosophy is like the very foundation of all libertarian arguments, right? So I don't think there's a good reason to believe it.
Okay.
But we can go back to this. But again, like to answer your question.
Okay. Well, let's back up a step then. So in our scenario, we started off with just me having the water bottle. Mm-hmm. I'm just sitting here with a water bottle, right? That's the start of our scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now that's passive, right? I'm just sitting here with the water bottle. I'm not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
You are taking an active course of action in the form of using force.
Mm-hmm.
Right? To take the water bottle.
Yeah.
Is not the burden of proof on the active rather than the passive side?
Burden of proof is in relation to proposition. So like the only thing I would need to prove in relation to me saying that I'm justified in taking the water bottle would be to prove that I want the water bottle.
But if you're taking the active stance, that puts a burden on you. But
yeah,
because all I need to do is just say it's my property. I'm taking the passive stance. I don't need to prove anything.
Yeah, like
if you're going to use force, you need to justify it in the way that an objective third party would be able to accept.
Wait, hold on. Why would I need to do that? Wait, you don't even believe in that one.
Because that's what we're talking about.
So if a third party agrees that like I have the right to take your water bottle, right? Like, does that mean I can take it?
Well, no, but we're talking about an objective third party. I said
that doesn't make sense.
I said.
That does not make sense. An objective third party. A third party is an individual. There's no position that they can have that's objective in the standard.
I think I forgot who it was, but one philosopher said basically when it comes to how do we define what's objective or not, what's good or not is like imagine an alien that knows nothing about human behavior or society, and like they're sentient, but they're sapient, but they don't necessarily have but they don't. But their culture is radically different from human society, and basically the best way to determine what's good or bad is to explain it to the alien, and if the alien says, yeah, that's actually that makes sense and isn't understandable, then we can argue that principle is good. Whereas if the alien goes, but what about this or that, then we can argue there's a problem with it.
Yeah, the space alien role play, and you can also do the android role play where you have to justify it to an android that is just a being of pure logic, pure computer code, and he's going to completely examine everything logically and try imagine justifying this to a purely logical android. And you cannot say that I'm taking the water bottle because I want the water bottle, because I can just say, well, I want to keep the water bottle, and the android is going to say, well, both of those on their own are on equal footing, but you are taking the active stance and using force against me, so that puts the burden of proof on you. You have to do something other than because I want it.
Why?
Because I just say because I want to keep it, and then that puts us on equal footing.
Well,
you don't meet a burden that way. You don't meet a burden that way.
Well,
if we're both on equal footing, you have not met your burden.
Well, no, the issue is that like the burden is like only in relation to proposition. So the burden is already fulfilled by me justifying that I do want the water bottle. That's the only burden that needs to be fulfilled. I'm saying I want to take this water bottle, and the burden is I have a justification because I want it, right? The burden's already fulfilled. The issue that you're talking about
but the burden is not fulfilled because I countered that by saying I want to keep the water bottle.
Well, then at that point, right, the only thing that like exists is who can actually enact what they want by force.
Well, no, because I'm not proposing any force at all. You're the only one proposing force in this equation.
Yeah, but like,
and that's why you're not justified, because you're initiating force.
No, there is justification. The justification is that I want it, right?
Well, no, we've already ruled that out as a justification. That cannot be a justification.
It's not ruled out, right?
Because I want it, because I say so, because reasons, because potato.
Well, the issue is that
those are all things that you say to try and justify it, but they don't actually justify it.
Well, no, they do justify it, right? And I'm about to explain why. So both like parties want a water bottle, right? Both parties have a reason for wanting to keep the water bottle, right? So both of them have like conflicting interests. It's not that they're on the same, well, they could be hypothetically, I'll even say that they're on the same like footing, right? But there needs no other further justification. Both parties have stated their justification, right? The only disagreement now and the only thing that happens is who actually gets to enact that. And at that point, there is no argument. It's just force.
No, because again, there's only force on one side of this equation. And as the side using force, you have not met, as the active side, you have not met your burden. And the active side would then lose to the passive side, and the passive side would continue.
But you're just saying
it's just like if you come up with a new medicine and you say it works, what are we going to do? We're going to test it. What are we going to test it against? A placebo. What is a placebo? It's passive. It doesn't do anything. You got to do better than the placebo. You can't look and say, hey, I did just as well as the placebo. That means I win. No, you got to do better than the placebo. The active side has to meet its burden over the passive side.
Well, hold on. When you say burden, right? What are you like referring to?
I'm talking about the burden of proof. The burden of proof for your proposition. You are acting under the proposition that you are justified in using force to take my water bottle. That is a proposition that you need to prove. You have the burden of proving that.
Justification. I did prove it. I proved it by me saying I want it.
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
That's
your critique here doesn't make sense. Your critique here doesn't make sense because the only thing it would prove is that two people have conflicting interests, and both of them can meet their burden of proof.
And one is an active side and one is a passive side. And if
Yeah, but that
neither
doesn't
side
matter.
met any, if it's still 50-50, if neither side has gotten ahead, the passive side wins.
Wait, why are you saying it's 50-50?
Because, I mean, you yourself said it. Neither one of us met any kind of burden. Okay, so you say you want it. I say I want it.
Wait, I
You know,
said both of them met their burden.
Until, well, either way, it's still 50-50. It's still on both sides. You don't have any better claim than I do.
Hold on. If you agree, wait, hold on. If you agree with that, if you agree that even if both of them made their burden or like fulfilled their burden, right? And that you're still saying it's 50-50, then like it doesn't matter at that point. The only thing that matters is who can actually enforce their will.
No,
That's
what
the only
matters
thing that
is
matters, right?
which side is the active side and which side is the passive side.
No, you're just no. That's just a
The active
subjective
side, this is basic logic. Active side has the burden of proof.
No. That's just a subjective preference you have, right?
That is
Because
not
this
a
isn't
subjective
proposition.
preference. Burden of proof
That
is
is-
not
that
a
is
subjective preference. It is part of basic logic.
Stop swearing, right? Like that is very much a subjective preference. This is not logic here. We're not talking about
Yes, we
propositions.
are. We're talking about logical justifications. We're talking about the logical, objective justification for the non-aggression principle. That's exactly what this conversation is about.
You're trying to prove the objective, like the force principle or whatever, right? Non-aggression principle. You're trying to justify that. So I'm saying that like you're already presupposing a system in which I don't agree with. You haven't like provided evidence.
I am saying that according to any logical system that would place the burden of proof on the active side, you have not met that burden of proof.
I don't
have to meet any burden of proof because I'm on the passive side. I don't have any burden.
Wait, no, you do. You're saying
no,
that
I don't.
Like, I don't.
No, I don't. I'm on the passive side.
Yeah, you're saying
the passive side doesn't have to prove a goddamn thing. The active side is the side with the burden of proof.
Well, I did like the issue. This is where
it would be just like in any court of law. The prosecution has to prove its case. Defense doesn't even have to open his mouth. Prosecution doesn't prove its case. Not guilty.
Don't appeal to the court of law because you don't believe in the court of law and the system or the way that's implemented now, right? So you can't even.
Oh, come on.
No, I can very much.
You are being incredibly disingenuous here. I am giving example after example after example after example after example.
And I'm showing how each example doesn't work, and that one doesn't work, and that one doesn't work.
They all work. Really. No. Each and every one of them work for exactly the same reason. They're following this same chain of logic.
No, the chain of logic doesn't even work there. All right, because I told you, you're saying that.
Where's the chain broken then? Where is the chain of logic broken?
It's not that it has to be broken. It's saying that.
No, it has to be. It has to be. Show where the chain of logic is broken. Show where a step is skipped, or show where the logic has been misapplied. Specify where did that chain break?
Yeah, sure. So the issue with the proposition that you have, right, is that essentially you've asked for the other side needs to give like a justification, right? They need to fulfill like a burden of some sort. We give the justification. And your only retort is that, well, the other person's justified. That doesn't mean anything, right? Because both of them, it just means both of them are justified in what they want. All you're saying is, well, you have to, the person taking the active stance has to be more justified because he wants something. And that's
no, because it's the active stance. Because it is the active stance. And Mr. No says it too in the chat. He says, the question should be, who got the water bottle first without stealing it, of course? Simple. A carjacker has as much right to steal my car as my right to force him from stealing it. So,
stop him.
Yeah, and Ishi Gray says if the path merges, it's the same logic.
So I'll tell you who like actually enforces or gets what they want in the situation, right? The thing that makes it unequal, or the thing that basically like balances it out, is who actually has the force to admit or enforce what they want. That's the
so might makes
here.
right. That's what you're saying. Yeah. Might makes right.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
If your logic is going to break down that much, I can't help you.
It's not a broke. You haven't shown any.
It's completely broken. It is completely broken. You have contradictions all over the place.
You haven't pointed to one.
If I could add my 2 cents here, I mean, this may seem a little weird, but I am going to use a video game as an example. But here's the point. So in the video game Fallout 4, there's a society of raiders, which are
I'm familiar with what you're about to say, but
Let,
Yeah.
I
let
just
him
need
let
to,
him
I need
get
to
let him
like,
say it. Let him say it.
okay. So there's basically a society of raiders. Now this is granted more of a problem with the gameplay and all that, but because like all the time people always ask, what does make good triumph over evil? And when I really thought about it while playing Fallout 4 and playing the nuclear land thing, that's when I finally realized why good logic does that, and it goes back to economics. It's actually because being good and being in the passive is actually economically sustainable. Because going back to might makes right. In that game, the Raiders have arguably some of the best weapons in the game. They've got very powerful weapons and they're very strong. But there's one major flaw, and why the whole might equals right doesn't work is because they don't produce anything. They don't grow crops. They don't have factories. Their whole society is based off of enslaving or stealing from other people. And really, when you think about it, how are they going to prosper when they run out of people to steal from?
And when they
Eventually
run
they're
out of
either
things to steal, if they're not producing everything, what happens when they've eaten all the food, and what happens when they've
yeah
used up all the devices until they're broken?
yeah because they don't produce anything. You see, some people who say might makes right attitude says, well, the Raiders are in the right because at the end of the day, they conquered you fair and square. But maybe in the short term, but in the grand scheme of things, they're screwed.
Well, and
so
it's like, think about, we want to wipe out smallpox. We've got one group of people who say let's do it with a vaccine, another group of people who say let's do it with prayer. You say might makes right. Let's say they fight it out, and then the prayer side wins. That means prayer works, right? Well, no, because they pray and then they all die of smallpox.
that no,
As opposed to, if the
those are two
vaccine
different
side had
propositions.
won, they would have wiped out smallpox. Because
That's two
might
different
didn't make because
propositions. That
might
doesn't work.
didn't make right.
No,
Might did not make right
that's
in
not
that
how that
circumstance,
works.
and that's all I
That's
need
not
to.
that's in the situation that initiates force, right? The people who say prayer works won or were more justified simply because they enacted the force. Now,
But
whether
it
or
didn't
not, like,
work. They
hold
all
on,
died of smallpox.
hold on. That again, and I'm about to explain that, right? The issue that you're contending with is what is more efficient for actually fighting COVID. That's a different proposition, or smallpox. My
No,
bad, not
it's
COVID.
about what's right, about what's correct, about
That
what matches reality.
um no, it's not really. No,
Well, I mean,
you're just
if
saying
you
that.
no, because if you make a vaccine, you wipe out smallpox. If you rely on
So
prayer, it wipes out a continent.
so I already addressed this, but you said that there were contradictions within my positions. Well, name one contradiction. I'm
I
interested.
named the contradiction, the fact that you have conflicting justifications. And as Mr. No pointed out in the comments, he said, if that's the case, then morality is pointless, Yuri. Yeah, if both people are able to say that, then the word justify doesn't make any sense.
Well, I agree. No,
The
hold on.
word justify does not have does not have any sort of meaning in the sense of letting us make conclusions about the
well,
objective
that's
reality of the situation.
well, hold on. I'm a subjectivist, right? I think justification is personal, right? So I don't think there's any like true objective justification for anything, right? But
But then
in
there
relation
is
to
no
that,
such thing as
what you
justification.
named, what
There's
you
no
named by
justification. There's
what
just
you
I
named
want.
by me having what you named by me having a contradiction was that there was two conflicting views that are in opposition to each other or contradictory to each other.
Yes.
It's not a contradiction in my worldview.
Yes. So, and if you're going by two completely subjective wants, we both want the same water bottle. Well, the reality is we can't both have the same water bottle unless we agree something like you drink half or I drink half or whatever. But if I want the entire water bottle, and you want the entire water bottle, we can't both have it. That's not a way that can exist in reality.
I agree that the outcome can't exist in reality, but who actually gets it, right? Like, or who has more justification than the other, or both of them having equal justification,
Okay,
and one
the
getting it
fact
and
that
one
you
not.
even uttered the
That's
phrase, who has more justification than the other means that you're going outside of a subjectivist viewpoint and you're looking for an objective
Not really.
reason. And I've given you that objectivity.
No, me saying that who has more justification is in reference only to what I view justification to be, not that there's some objective criteria for justification.
So it's that way because you want it, because you say so, because potato.
Yeah, I believe that morality is subjective.
So,
yes.
yeah. So
like the thing,
you're not
is,
going to get anywhere like that.
Well, here's the issue, right? You're claiming that morality is objective. You haven't demonstrated that.
Yes, I have.
You really haven't. You just said so.
No, you're the one who's just saying so. You're the one who's saying it is because I want it because potato. I'm the one who's going on an unbroken chain of universally applicable logic from first principles.
No, I already discussed that. It doesn't matter. It's still subjective.
How is an unbroken chain of universally applicable logic from first principles subjective?
It's not that the chain of logic might be subjective. It's the conclusions that you derive from with that.
No, the conclusions are the result of the unbroken chain of universally applicable logic.
So do you want me to demonstrate why this doesn't work?
Yes. Break the chain of logic. Show me where the chain of logic falls apart.
Yeah, sure. Premise 1, all clowns are gods. Premise 2, clowns exist. Conclusion, clowns that exist in the real world are gods. I used an unbroken chain of logic using propositional justification.
But you did not start from first principles. You just made assertions.
That doesn't.
And your initial assertion, that all clowns are gods is wrong. Your initial assertion is wrong. You did not start. You did not use an unbroken chain of logic, of universally applicable logic in first principles.
First principles are just. You said an unbroken chain. You're justifying
unbroken chain of logic. Start with the law of identity. Start with non-contradiction. Start with excluded middle. Start with the first principles of logic. Start with the first principles of all logic and reason that allowed us to wipe out smallpox and put a man on the moon and do everything else.
I did, right? I did, right? So, the moral system that you're advocating for here is the non-aggression principle, and you're saying that the non-aggression principle is justified via an unbroken chain of logic.
From first principles, primarily from the law of non-contradiction. That's the only one I need to start from to get there.
So by first principles, you mean just like classical logic?
Yeah, the same logic that allowed us to put man on the moon and wipe out smallpox.
Yeah, basically, I was just gonna say, basically, the rule is A cannot be B and not A, basically like that.
Yeah.
What do you think propositional logic is?
That's based on, well, it starts with the law of identity. A equals A, and A cannot be not A, and something cannot be A and not A in the same sense at the same time.
So what is propositional logic? Do you view it as classical?
I mean, if you're talking about the syllogism, you just talked about, you gave a syllogism that was valid but not sound. It has to be both. It has to be both valid and sound.
Exactly.
Yeah, and what I gave you is logic that is both valid and sound, and I showed that.
That's exactly the point. You used, right, a chain of logic that like supports your conclusion, or like basically reasons the conclusion out, right? Not supports it, but reasons it out, right? So the issue is that you saying I have an unbroken chain of logic, though that would only prove that like your syllogism or your idea is like valid, right? But it doesn't actually prove that your conclusions themselves, right, are actually
no,
true.
It's both valid and sound. Yours was valid but not sound. Mine is both valid and sound. Because if you take those exact same first principles and go from them in an unbroken chain of logic, you can wipe out smallpox. You can put a man on the moon. You can land a robot on a comet. You can make cars that drive themselves.
We already demonstrated how it wasn't sound, but you're going to disagree. It's fine.
No. It's absolutely sound. I have shown every step of the way how it's sound.
And I say it's not sound, so that's fine. It's fine.
Well, your thing is I just say it's not sound because potato, because I say so, because it is, because I want it to be. That's the only thing you've ever brought to the conversation here.
I think, again, this is kind of my amateur historian bringing it up. I think a perfectly good example about your argument is that you're trying to make that might makes right and all that, and
Hold on, I gotta go. I gotta go. Nice talking to you.
I was starting to have
All
fun,
things.
man.
Okay.
Nice guy. Nice shot. Anyways, I gotta go. I actually have to go do something, but nice
This
talking
was
to you.
fun, man.
Mm.
Oh man,
Aw,
I was starting to have fun.
yeah. I was about to say because the whole might makes right thing because and it goes back to my example with the Raiders is that because we actually have historical examples of this is that if you're like what you said earlier if your principal philosophy has some validity but it's not sound you're not going to last long if might truly made right and that's the way things are then we'd still have groups like the Roman Empire and all that's still around today but
Yeah.
we don't
Yeah,
and
well,
contrary to
that's what it happened. What's happened because we're kind of living through it now. You know, as government gets more and more power, they start using the 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 mechanism of justice, which was set up to try to be a real world application of logical moral principles, and then they start twisting it to use against their political enemies. That's the part where everything falls apart because then people look at that system and they lose confidence in it. And as soon as they lose confidence in it, they stop believing in the ruling class. And when they stop believing in the ruling class, the empire topples.
Yeah, I mean that's honestly I was about to I did I you were doing a better job, but a common thing I would have exampled is, I don't want to sound like an SJW, but I do think it's reasonable to a degree is partially your feelings. When people talk about how you want to keep your water bottle, but I want to take it. Well, think of it from the person's perspective. How would you feel if you had a water bottle, you got it completely valid, and some guy came along and take it from you? And when you say, "Hey, why'd you take it from me?" and they say, "Because I'm bigger and stronger than you, so I can beat you up over it," how would you feel? Would you want to hang out with that person? Would you want to align yourself with that person? Probably not.
Yeah. And how far do you think you'll get trying to make a society on that basis?
Yeah, going back to what I said about the Raiders, it's like I don't care how strong you are, I don't care how tough you are gonna run out of people to raid and enslave, and when that happens, what are you gonna do?
Just like the old saying about socialism, it works until they start running out of other people's money. As soon as there are no more things to pilfer, as soon
Yeah,
as there's no more food to steal, as soon as there are no more, working cars to carjack
yeah,
and everything's fallen apart, what happens then?
yeah. I mean, I will give, ironically, I hate to say this, but I will give, the National Socialists some credit. They kind of acknowledge this to a certain degree, in their statements, because TIK History did a really good video on why Hitler started the war. And the reason why he started the war was because, to his credit where credit is due, he was not pretending, saying, "Oh, the workers will form their communities, and we'll get this, this self, reliant, paradise." He acknowledged we got to get it from other nations.
Yep.
We gotta go to the places that have those resources and bring it under German control, so they can benefit the German working class.
I think it was Poland. I think in the during the years of the Soviet Union, and someone asked, well, if you don't have a price mechanism, if you don't have traditional economics, if everything's a collective, how do you know, what to charge for different products? And they just said, well, we just look at capitalist countries and copy their prices.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's an old joke they used to say in the Soviet Union, where the joke is that they would have every single nation be communist except for the United States and Switzerland. Why? Because we need the United States to buy food from, and we need Switzerland to tell us what the prices are.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, you try to make a country on the principles of socialism and it falls apart. You try to make a country on the principle of might makes right and it falls apart. You make a
Yeah, I mean,
country based on the principles of justice and property rights, and it seems
uh,
to do a lot better, at least for a while,
yeah.
as long as you follow those principles.
I mean, I brought this up. I kind of brought this up earlier today because I did acknowledge that people back in the medieval periods and all that they didn't have the same stuff that we had today, like guns and all that, and So, one could argue that maybe during that period of time it kind of sort of worked, but going back to why it's not sound, once better technology came along, that's when people realized, hey, you know what? We don't necessarily need a legion or a lord to protect us. We've got guns now and all that.
Hey, fourth.
Yeah,
Hey, how's it going?
All right, been a while.
yeah,
Yeah, it has. Um,
yeah, yeah. We
yeah.
finally we finally got someone with an opposing opinion coming for a little bit. Then he had to
Yeah,
bail
you
on
missed
us.
it. We had a subjectivist on.
Yeah,
What are we talking about?
we had a subjectivist on. Basically, a
You
guy
missed
who
it.
basically a guy who believed in might makes right.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
It was fun.
And we were just talking about how we didn't get an opportunity to say it. Well, I mean, we kind of did, but he didn't really take it in. Basically, he pointed out, I think the biggest proof that the non-aggression principle works is nations is places that have lasted the longest are ones that follow the non-aggression principle versus ones that took on the whole might makes right. Maybe if they're lucky, they last a couple centuries, but they inadvertently collapse in onto themselves.
subjectivism is like an evolved defense mechanism. The only people who really embrace it are the ones who, in an odd sense, are wise enough to beware the might.
Yeah.
They all
But
seem to
you know,
imagine themselves on the receiving end.
Oh yeah.
Notice how his example was him taking my water bottle, not me taking his water bottle.
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, you weren't saying I'm gonna steal your water bottle. I just want to keep my water bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what other current events have we been discussing?
Mm. Yeah, we
Oh,
briefly we briefly we briefly talked about Sweet Baby Inc. a little bit at the beginning.
Hmm.
How
yeah,
it's
I
basically
didn't
Gamergate
really, I wasn't
2.0.
really following that.
Yeah.
And neither here. I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
I have been very busy lately working on that website that I mentioned a while back. Um, yes, it's very much still in the works. But one of the reasons why I haven't come on this podcast is that, I've been hoping that I'll be able to make an announcement that the website is live. We haven't gotten there yet, but we seem to be getting very closer by the day.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's how it works though, because man, you say, okay, we can do this in a year because and then 6 months go by and it's like, yeah, we're on track. We're going to get this in the year, and then you start getting to all the niggling little details that you didn't really foresee, and then a year turns into 2, turns into 5.
Yeah. That's why, like,
Yep.
that's what. Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes back to video games. That's why, like, I get it. There's a thing about setting goals, but you also have to realize you can't actually. You should never say such and such a time tops because you never know what's going to happen.
Well,
Elon
yeah, as
Musk has this
Yudkowsky
problem.
calls that the
He is just so optimistic about everything. Yes, this is going to be in 2 weeks or 6 months or whatever. And of course, he's way underestimating
yeah
it. He's a brilliant man in so many
yeah
ways,
that
but he's not good with timelines. Very
that's why
optimistic there.
it's always called it's always referred to as Elon time. Now, I will give him, to his credit, the Grasshopper program exceeded its expectations and timeline. In fact, they kind of like made so much progress so rapidly with that they decided to just skip the later phases and start implementing in the Falcon 9.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, Schism
but
said,
yeah,
oh, "Sweet baby wants girls to look bad in games, even the real life mocap." What's always ironic about that whole thing is that like so many people say that it's body shaming to have beautiful people on there, and I'm like to show beautiful people, and I'm like, well, that person's beautiful and you're shaming them because they look beautiful. Isn't that body shaming?
Yeah, they tried to force all women into androgynous look, which is basically saying that there's something shameful about the female body.
Yeah, that's
If you have to
ironic.
remove all traces of femininity from it.
Yeah, I mean, because like if I recall correctly, wasn't feminism also about sex positivity?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was a lot of second wave feminism.
Yeah, there's the like I remember seeing like there's that old funny joke, there's that old funny joke, there's like an old funny joke, about how oh, I wish I could remember. I'm ruining the punchline, but it was like a joke about an older woman in her 60s, and she came from an old fashioned, and this sitcom took place in the 1980s, and her husband dead, so she's dating around, and then one day after a date with her boyfriend, she goes to the doctor, and the doctor's like, okay, what's wrong? Well, I was with my new boyfriend, and I felt funny after that night. Well, what do you mean? Describe it to me. And she goes into what she was feeling, and then the doctor goes, madam, I think you just experienced an orgasm. An orgasm? Women can have those? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if I recall correctly, back in the old days, it was actually considered taboo for a woman to have an orgasm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah, that was the
I wouldn't know.
Calvinist
I'm not that
puritanical
old.
streak.
yeah, 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 the puritanical streak. It's like you can still have sex because obviously that is necessary for survival of the human race, but you can't enjoy it.
Yeah, you can only have sex through a hole in the blanket.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because contrary to what some people say, like they knew about sex, back during those time during those quote unquote puritanical times and all that. The difference is that a lot of those preachers said sex is a they viewed sex the same way we would view going to the bathroom. It's one of those things where it's biologically necessary, but we should not take pleasure in it or anything. It's just something we pretend doesn't happen.
Well, those were the ones who ended up writing the history books,
Mm.
because
Well,
there is
a lot of it, most,
every last little piece of information that exists that says that humans have always been as sexual as we are today.
Yeah,
yeah, well, a lot of those prohibitions were generally about extramarital sex or sex for pleasure, as in non-reproductive sex. And I think the mimetic strategy there is that ideologies that had prohibitions against alternative kinds of sex are going to, well, their followers are going to just have good old conventional sex and end up making a whole bunch of babies in the process.
yeah.
Crod says history will always be exposed by the truth, not the liars of history who will contradict their own sophistry.
Uh,
Yeah, truth tends to win out over time.
yeah.
Yeah, as well, generally when you have open and free discourse, yes.
Yeah.
But there are periods in history where we've gone backwards in terms of our understanding.
We might be in one of those periods right now. Time will tell.
Yeah. Do any of you follow the Jolly Heretic, aka Professor Dutton?
Not familiar with the name.
Me
Uh,
neither.
he's a YouTuber, and he's kind of argued that we're basically in idiocracy is kind of real, and because there hasn't really been any selection pressure to weed out deleterious mutations regarding intelligence, that those have accumulated to the point that they're really starting to show, and yeah,
Not,
that's that's
not gonna,
basically
not
how
gonna,
things are
not gonna,
going.
not gonna lie. I don't like the movie Idiocracy. It's got its funny moments, but it's totally flawed.
Yeah, just as a matter of logical reality, it doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah. Like one really stupid scene and all that is when it's like it's like this soft drink company bought out the FDA, and I'm like, buddy, and I'm just like, Mike Judge, do you not know how the FDA works? Like I see so many people, that say, you know, that say, that say, the issue, with agencies like the FDA is that, they're actually privately run and not publicly run. If only we just got to get them back into the public hand. And I'm like, they're already in the public hand, and they're still corrupt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they are corrupt, arguably because they are in the public hand.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, most people don't even
but
realize how
I
corrupt the
think
FDA
it
is. The
is
FDA is so corrupt, it's not even funny.
Oh, yeah.
right. I think Mike Judge's general thesis that we have been evolving stupider over time is, well, generally true.
And generally,
Uh,
I like how how one critic
No,
described the
because
show.
it seems to. I can't remember the name of the effect, but it shows that like average
the
IQ
Flynn
goes up
effect.
by something like 3 points every 10 years, and they have to keep
Yeah, the
rescaling.
Flynn effect,
The Flynn effect.
and
Yeah.
the reasons for that are probably more to do with just um, economic development, and that generally people have better access to education. But in terms of the G factor, like the underlying genetics of people, has probably been going in the opposite direction.
But the
Yeah.
problem is, we know how population dynamics works, and it doesn't work the way it's shown in Idiocracy. That stupid people are poor and have a lot of children. Rich people are smart and have fewer children. It doesn't really work that way.
Yeah. Not to
Well,
mention,
no, it doesn't
not,
really work that way. However, there is less selection pressure weeding out stupid people nowadays, and there has been almost no selection pressure weeding out stupid people since the Industrial Revolution.
I was about to say this. Another problem I have with the movie Idiocracy is that it kind of sort of blames, free will and all that on the reason why humanity became stupid and only the stupid people survived. But the thing is, those people at the beginning of the film that are going, when you look at all these global problems, that's why we don't want to have kids. Well, Mike Judge, people like you are the reason why people think like that,
Yeah.
because you're telling them, oh, we're doomed, humanity's getting dumber and stupider, and we're destroying everything. Why put children through that? Also there was one really funny negative comment I read about Idiocracy and all that, and basically the comment was quite simple, and it actually got a lot of reviews. And it says so Mike Judge is basically saying the solution to preventing a society like that is we got to have all the poor people killed.
And I am going to have to apologize to Fighting Zenithian over on Rumble because I was so involved in the discussions we've been having. I forgot to check Odyssey and Rumble and he's been over there chatting on Rumble. He said, "Hey, Shane, Scarface, and Yuri." He said, "Between the Crusaders and the Muslim imperialists, they were both terrible." I'll agree with that. And he says, "I would think the whole war on sex is just a hotbed of hypocrisy," and I'll agree with that too. But earlier he had said, "Speaking of violent thugs, what are your thoughts on Attorney General turned Governor Jeff Landry?" I'm not sure who he's talking about there, but either of you
Yeah,
know?
I don't know, but you already know how I view district attorneys, having gone through the legal system myself.
Yeah.
I think they shouldn't exist anymore. I've come to the conclusion they serve no practical purpose other than to keep the state in power.
So sorry I was ignoring you for a while there, Zenithian. I was just too preoccupied with
Yeah.
everything else. No one on Odyssey, but
Yeah. And I will say, having gone through the legal process, I will say my stance on lawyers has kind of changed too. Like, there's that joke that everyone hates lawyers. I will say this: I think defense lawyers shouldn't be hated to the degree they are.
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
among
I
the
mean,
best, really.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the issue with lawyers isn't that, oh, there's a guy who's clearly, obviously guilty, and that lawyer let him go free. That's not what happened. The bad lawyers are the ones that are enforcing, the copyright laws, and and the ones that are handling the cease and desist, or the ones that are basically being hired by the government to twist the Constitution around. The ones that are like, well, technically, like that, those kinds.
Well, and if you are
Well,
ever in, like you were, Chris, you might have been told this, in a position to need a defense attorney, one of the things that they tell people, bystanders, like, look, Forget what you see in the movies. Forget what you say on TV. Forget what all of the politicians and pundits say. If you're actually guilty of the crime, there's not much I can do for you. I can make sure your rights are respected. I can make sure, you get a fair judgment and, don't get, a super unreasonable amount of time or fines or whatever. But if you're actually guilty, I can't really just do some magic technicalities and get you out of it.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's the reason why I pled no contest, because I didn't want to, but my lawyer told me, look, that's in your best interest, because, and, we kind of had this conversation, he said, because, in the grand scheme of things, once you do your time, you can potentially, appeal, you can figure out a way to get your gun rights back. But if we go to trial, you are probably going to end up being convicted. And if that happens, that is not only are you going to go to prison for a few years, when you get out, it is going to be a lot harder for you to fight that charge.
And Fighting
A
Zenithian,
lot of people.
hang on just one second. Let me get Fighting Zenithian's comment
Sure.
where he said, well said, Scarface and Louisiana would be better off without the DAs or the government in general. So,
Yeah.
what were you saying, Fourth?
Well, a lot of people are hesitant to admit it, but the legal system actually works a lot better than political commentators and the media like to portray it.
Yeah.
There are a lot of hurdles that have to be overcome in order to convict a person versus the other way around.
Well, I will give credit where credit is due. The United States system, as corrupt and incompetent as it is, you got to admit it is a little better than other places, because at least they give you an attempt to make your argument in court. Where there's still, unfortunately, a lot of countries out there where the policy isn't innocent until proven guilty, or guilty until proven innocent. It's more of, if you're innocent, then why am I talking to you? I know that you.
And this is by design. It is by design, and it achieves this goal. When the legal system fails, it is usually in favor of the criminal, I would say.
But I think, Chris, in your case, it was unusual because your thing just happened to have happened in a state and during a time where that was really a political hotbed.
Yeah, something.
The whole Kyle Rittenhouse thing and everything. Yeah.
Now I couldn't guarantee this for certain, but it wouldn't surprise me where if the Kyle Rittenhouse thing wasn't going on, they probably would have gone a little bit more lenient on me, or if not, maybe say, I mean, you could, or yeah, the kid, he did fire a warning shot, which is reckless and all that. So, but I don't think this counts as domestic abuse. Just fine him for recklessness and just go on with it.
If not, just drop it entirely, because remember, they let you plead no contest, and they don't do that like normally. Even if it's something even if it's something like your first offense with like half an ounce of marijuana or something, they'll say, okay, well, we'll give you a diversion agreement where it goes down, you would serve out all this, but we're going to kind of suspend it. And then if you go, whatever the term is, like if you would have been sentenced to 6 months, if 6 months go by and you've been good and you haven't committed any other crimes, then it goes away from your record. That's usually what they'll do. They usually won't just let you go, okay, no contest.
Yeah.
What were you saying about a warning shot?
Look, I don't really like talking about it because it brings up bad memories, but I had an incident with my mom's ex-boyfriend.
Oh, something that you fired a warning shot, not Kyle Rittenhouse. That's what you were saying?
Yeah,
in his situation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay, never mind.
And look, everyone.
I'll just say, so you don't have to recount it. If anyone wants the details, just search the YouTube channel, because we went over this in detail when it happened.
And look, yes, I get it. Firing a warning shot wasn't the wisest idea, but the thing you got to remember, and I bring this up to people, I had never been in a situation like that before, and we see this with interviews with police officers that have said this, that have flat out admitted all that training doesn't prepare you for being in that kind of situation. So,
well, I am not familiar with the situation. I haven't watched the breakdown of that, so I wasn't trying to comment on that. I just brought it up because what?
I was about to say, now that I think about it, that's another reason what shows, the corruption of the police department is that, even if a police officer like genuinely makes a valid mistake, that's just it. If it's a valid mistake, it's like, well, it's a valid mistake. Anyone could have done that. It's like, okay, fine, but I got a question. Why does the cop get away from making a mistake, whereas I make a mistake that didn't result in anyone getting seriously injured or killed, but I'm still punished for it?
Yeah. Well, I had a comment that I posted on one of recent TV's videos on the Derek Chauvin trial that got a lot of thumbs up. And my comment was basically that it doesn't matter what killed Derek Chauvin. What matters is the state of mind, or not what killed Derek Chauvin, what killed George Floyd. So, excuse me. What matters is Derek Chauvin's state of mind.
Yeah.
There's three possibilities. He could have been following the department policy, which had good reason, or if he was following the department policy, then he's not necessarily guilty. He was just given bad advice by his department, and the department should may be held liable. And then, well, if he was violating department policy, was he doing it in a way that was reckless and may have resulted in George Floyd's death? And if so, then he's guilty of negligence. And then the third possibility, and this is how they convicted him, which I disagree with, is that was he being malicious? Did he know that what he was doing was going to kill George Floyd? And if so, then he's guilty of attempted murder or murder, like regardless of whether that was actually what killed him. So
I'm kind of in the thing where, from what I've seen, is that while I do agree, I don't think I don't think I do agree that that Chauvin wasn't trying to kill George Floyd. Judging from what I've heard about him, if I were to tell him stop doing that to him, you're going to seriously hurt him or possibly kill him, he probably would have just been like, I don't care. He's a
But
criminal.
people did say that.
well,
They were
Yeah.
saying that
But
at the time. It's
so
like,
the
look,
thing
you
is-
got him on the ground. He's cuffed. Just put him in the car and take him away. And that would be my question for Chauvin with his knee on George Floyd's neck the whole time is, what the hell were you waiting for? What
Well,
was
from
going
what-
to be
no,
the end game?
they
If
were-
George Floyd hadn't died,
there
how
are
would
some
you have
complicated answers here.
how would you have visualized that
Okay.
ending up?
Yeah. So the thing is, the most damning thing about that case for Chauvin was the fact that after George Floyd became unresponsive, he didn't relieve his weight from his chest, and that is just criminally negligent in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I have heard from some.
yeah.
I have heard on the comments
Now-
from some police officers that have said,
okay, I'm not finished.
Okay.
Now, as far as ignoring bystanders yelling at him, I mean, bystanders yell at the police all the time, and most of the time, what they're saying is totally stupid. So now, were they being totally stupid here? No, but the fact that the police were disregarding what the bystanders were saying is not really all that relevant. The fact that he was disregarding the fact that George Floyd was motionless, that is the important fact.
Well,
yeah,
it's just the basic thing that is, as soon as you've got someone on the ground and handcuffed, you have a duty of care to them. You are in control. You are responsible for everything that happens after that. It's
And
just like with Daniel Shaver, the guy in the hotel room. They had him on his knees, legs crossed, fingers laced behind his back. So many people in police and military say, at that point, you are in control of everything. And it was just ridiculous making him go through another 4 minutes of calisthenics only to shoot him. At that point, you're in control. You now have him in custody, and what happens next is on you.
And as some ex-police officers, I was about to say, as some ex-police officers have even said, another issue with him was, that like, because even if it was true that the headlock, that the elbow had nothing to do with his death and he was having a medical emergency, the appropriate thing to do isn't to just keep him on the ground. Is you realize, holy crap, this guy I'm arresting is having a medical emergency. You get on your radio and you contact contact line and you say, "Hey, I've got a suspect in here. He's having some kind of medical emergency. I need medical
Well,
assistance."
Well, again, you
that's
have a
exactly
duty of
what they
care.
did. They did call for EMS immediately, and he died in the interim while they were waiting for them to arrive.
Yeah, but you don't, keep your knee
But I
on
mean,
the guy,
they could have they weren't even like chest compressions or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, they
Oh
basically they
no,
basically
and our police officers should be trained for EMS. So
Yeah, and there were like
yeah,
what, 4 of them around, 5 of them.
yeah.
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 And another problem too, from what I understand from like, and we actually have video of this scene, is like how nonchalant they are. Like, you've got a guy, clearly he's on the ground, he's not responding. You guys at the very least, should be on contact with the EMS saying, "Hey, this guy's not responding. I don't feel a pulse or
Well, they
anything.
were.
What should I do?" Instead, they were just sitting on him and not really doing much, and they were just laughing
No,
and telling.
they had called EMS, and EMS were on their way. And there's only so much they can do with the limited training. They should have had more training, but um,
They should have
them
had more
acting
training to
nonchalant.
be able to
Them,
do CPR at least.
yeah, yes. But them acting nonchalant is not indicative of guilt. Police officers need to remain calm in emergency situations. So let's
But
not
my
get
my
carried
other
away
question
along
is
that line.
my other question is if they were all behaving wonderfully and perfectly like every cop should, why was the one cop trying to stand in the way of people videoing it, and why did Derek Chauvin keep trying to lean his head to hide his face from them?
Yeah, that's possibly indicative of wrongdoing. Now, a lot of people are just camera shy in general, even when they're not doing anything wrong. So let's not speculate too much, but they should be trained as officers to be more welcoming of cameras, and that would tend to uh, help their case and deter any nefarious activity
Yeah,
in
that's
avoiding
something that
cameras.
there was a video that was just released across the pond over in the UK about suspicious things to look out for, and it was something like someone going to the store and purchasing knives was one of them. But another one
Or
was,
hammers.
but yeah, and hammers, yeah, and another one was someone filming the police on their phone. The police are doing their thing, and the guy's filming them, and that's something suspicious you're supposed to take note of and
Yeah.
report.
Yeah, going back to what I said earlier, Britain's really going that step is really going into the step of the Soviet style of justice of, if you're innocent, then why am I talking to you, huh?
And we got another one from Fighting
Yeah.
Zenithian over on Rumble. Speaking of lawmen behaving badly, what do you think of Forgotten History's video on Harry Connick Sr.? I don't know anything about him, but
I know that he had an actor son.
we know Harry Connick Jr., yeah, actor, musician, yeah. Yep, that's about all I know.
Yeah, I know he was in the movie Memphis Belle, and he was in the show Will and Grace. It's the only two things that come to mind for him.
Yeah, sorry we can't help you again there, Zenithian, but I'm keeping an eye out for your chats. Also on
Okay, so I'm
Odyssey, but
looking.
there's
So I'm
nothing
looking.
on
So I'm,
Odyssey right now.
so I'm looking him up. So Harry Connick Sr. He was apparently a district attorney of of the Orleans Parish in New Orleans, and he had a history of basically prosecutorial misconduct, and he was infamous where if someone was sentenced then they were on death row, but there was new evidence that was showing they might not necessarily really be guilty and they could potentially be innocent. He would often have the evidence destroyed or hidden, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's
apparently
pretty
Forgotten
shitty.
History has a video on him. Is Forgotten History, is that the channel that was doing all those videos on the Rust film shooting? Or do you guys know?
Hang on, I'll look it up real quickly.
I don't know.
It does. It's not really one that I can say I'm familiar with the channel, but I think I've seen some of their videos, and something in my brain is talking about the Rust shooting, which they convicted the armorer for, which I think is bullshit for so many different reasons.
Yeah.
On a totally unrelated note, there was a very interesting Supreme Court case out of my home state here in Colorado. There
Okay,
was
so
a case. Sorry.
Forgotten History. He has a video. Apparently, Henry Connick Sr. is on Forgotten History's playlist series called Most Corrupt, which I guess is where he talks about corrupt politicians and all that.
Yeah, Finding Zenithian says he was the former DA of New Orleans and was known for being corrupt and throwing innocent people in jail while letting violent criminals run free, which sounds a lot like Letitia James.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what were you saying, Fourth?
So there was a Supreme Court case. This is totally unrelated. Sorry, tangent. But there was an interesting Supreme Court case out of Colorado. It was a man. So there's this old law that's been on the books since the beginning that says that any navigable water, regardless of whether it's on private property or public property, you have to allow boats to be able to travel through that waterway. And there was an angler who waded through this creek, through somebody's private property, wading through this creek, and the property owner told him to get out of there, and he said no, and the property owner started throwing rocks at him. So the fisherman sued the angler for the right to be, citing that law for the right to use that waterway to get to his favorite fishing spot. And the argument is like, well, does it make a difference whether he's on a boat or not? And unfortunately, they dismissed the case for some ridiculous reason. But my take on it was that this was the new Roe v. Wade.
How so?
Roe v. Wade.
Oh, Roe
It's
v.
a
Wade.
joke.
Yeah. Roe v. Wade.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know,
Telling that joke was definitely a crime, I'm sure.
Yeah. We'll have to take that one up as
going back to the whole the whole district attorneys throwing innocent people in jail and all that. I think the biggest issue, and this is one thing I disagree with some people I normally like Tim Pool and Actual Justice Warrior, when they talk about why crime's going up in America. I think the issue isn't that oh, we're getting softer on crime and we're defunding the police. It's like, no, it's not because we're doing that. It's because the police are, they're being told, okay, you see these black rioters and thugs and all that, don't arrest them. But if you see a white guy, trying to defend his property, arrest him because he's a racist. That's the problem we're having.
We're having a lot of problems, mostly about the police not being accountable.
Yeah, because the sad reality is that the whole, and this is what I brought this up before, the whole defund the police was just a sham, because really, when you really looked at it, they didn't want the police defunded. They just wanted to say, hey, stop going after our side, go after the people we don't like. Yeah,
I mean, in theory, I agree. In theory, I agree with what's it called? Qualified immunity, because as it's written, qualified immunity only applies to cops that are following their official policies and enforcing the law, and therefore it should be the department that is held responsible if their officers are adhering to those policies and not the individual officer. But in practice, that doesn't work out so well.
Well, the problem with it is you use the words as it's written, and the problem is it's not written. It's not a law passed by Congress. It was made up out of whole cloth by the courts, and they just do whatever. Like there was one case where they're supposed to look at, like, you have to have notice that your behavior is wrong, and so like there was you have to basically find another case that matches yours. And just to get you the idea, there was this one guy or his family, I think, because I don't remember if they killed him or not, but they were suing the cops because they had him handcuffed and they still shot him. And they were trying to say, well, they don't have immunity because of this previous case where exactly the same thing happened. And the Supreme Court said, no, it's not exactly the same case because in one case he was on his knees and in the other case he was prone on the ground. And that was the whole reason for denying qualified immunity. And the whole thing is just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like you said, it should be, if the cops are following department policy, you can say, okay, they're not responsible, but the department is. The problem is it ends up being immunity all the way up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem. It
And I mean we brought this up before with the George Floyd protests. The sad reality is that getting rid of that cop wasn't going to fix anything because, like you said, all that's going to happen is the Minneapolis police department is going to be, it's like, yeah, this guy was a terrible police officer. He was bad, but he's going to jail for the rest of his life. It's never going to happen again. And then they go back to doing what they've always been doing.
Yep. And that's what I think a lot of the Derek Chauvin thing was. It was the city of Minneapolis just throwing everything they had at Chauvin to say, see, we go after corrupt cops. Okay, dust our hands off. We've taken care of the problem.
Right.
There's no more problems here with the police. Please look somewhere else. Don't look here anymore.
Yep.
Yeah, there was another case in Colorado. This one is related. There was a runaway truck coming down from the mountains on I-70. You might have heard about this. And the truck driver crashed and killed 4 people. I was actually on the on-ramp to I-70 at the time that happened, and didn't see the accident, but it was about a quarter mile up the road from where I was, and I saw the billowing smoke and the stuff. Anyway, so in that case, there was a driver who had poor English skills, could not read the signs. He had poor training in the mountains. He was employed out of a company in Texas, and basically didn't know what he was doing, didn't know to downshift and use the gears to slow his truck down coming down the mountain. So he burnt up his brakes and failed to do his inspections. And then he missed the most important part is he missed the runaway truck ramps signs, probably because he couldn't read English. And they threw him under the bus. Well, I mean, yes, he definitely deserved some punishment, but they gave him like 80 years in prison or something, for an accident that killed people. And I think maybe some of that might have been a way of the trucking company that employed him trying to wash their hands of responsibility, the scapegoating kind of thing.
Actually, that kind of also reminds me of. It kind of reminds me of the captain of that ship, the Costa Concordia. You've heard about that one, right?
I have not.
No.
That was that Italian cruise ship that it was trying to do a sail by salute, and it hit some rocks that were hidden by waves, and basically it was a complete shit show because the captain, wasn't issuing out a proper SOS or doing proper protocols, and as a result, by the time rescue happened, the ship was partially sinking, and some people unfortunately drowned. Now the captain was an incompetent idiot in this one, and but he later did something where he revealed that he wasn't fully responsible because people were asking him stuff. It's like, dude, Captain, why didn't you raise general alert when your ship hit the rocks and lost power? Why weren't you doing all that? And apparently he did that because the company that owned Costa Concordia was encouraging its people, you have to do the sail by salute because our customers like it. Also, if you strike a rock and something bad happens, try to keep don't raise general alert because that's disturbing the customers, basically.
So we got SKM says, allow for stand your ground and concealed carry, then crime will dry up real quick. Probably, I would even go further and say constitutional carry.
Yeah.
And we also got another one from Finding Zenithian over on Rumble. Jeff Landry had a special legislative session in Louisiana to make LA police even less accountable. Landry used to be a narcotics officer, which is a red flag in my book. Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Something that shouldn't even be a crime to begin with.
Yeah.
And it's just a crime because of civil asset forfeiture, and then police departments profit tremendously off of doing these drug busts where they confiscate a whole bunch of cash,
Yep.
and even if the owner wasn't even accused of a crime, they still get to keep that for the most part.
Well, and
I
also,
don't know. I don't
I
know if
keep saying, if you want to do a warrantless search and you don't have anything else to do, all you got to do is say, "I smell marijuana."
Going back, actually going back to that, I don't now granted, I don't know if it's true or not. This is just something that a YouTuber that specializes in real estate, he did a video on squatters and all that. He says that's one of the reasons why squatters almost never get punished, even when it's 100% clear they're breaking the law. The reason why is because a lot of squatters are generally they're unemployed bums and whatnot, and there's no money to be made by arresting them, And police departments, they want civil asset forfeiture. They want some meat to go with that. They want a fine or something to confiscate that they can go with that. That's the reason why they let squatters go a lot of times. But if you're like a fairly successful businessman and you forget to dot your T to dot your I's on a tax reform, they immediately send the cavalry after you because they're looking for the fine. They're looking for that whole, okay, just pay the legal fine and we'll drop the charges. That's what they're looking for. Yeah, that's another
I
thing
also
too.
missed another one from Zenithian. Before that, he had said, if you think Connick was bad, I found another Louisiana prosecutor who was even worse, named Hugo Holland, and he links to Radley Balco talking about him. All right, what were you saying, Forth?
Man, Louisiana, what is it with
should
you?
just be an absolutely glaring conflict of interest to have it so that the department that finds the cash is the one that profits, that reaps the benefits of it. No.
Yep.
Yeah, fun fact, that thing you said about the IRS, about how the IRS will embezzlement here and there if the amount of money you're making doesn't exceed the cost it would take to arrest you. I've actually heard a lot of police departments will do the same thing. They'll let minor crimes like shoplifting get away, even though stuff like that builds up. It's simply because in the short term it doesn't bring anything. They're gonna wait. From their point of view, they're gonna waste time and resources. Bringing this kid to court and saying, okay, you stole unlawfully, 30 days probation and all that. But they're not going to get any fines or anything out of it.
My wife will confirm from her experience at her store, cops don't do shit about shoplifters.
Oh yeah. If you are lucky, the best you'll get is the officer telling the person, yeah, don't steal. It's wrong. There. Okay. Have a good day. Wear your seatbelt.
Well, and they don't have anyone there who has any sort of legal authority to detain them. So they just got to let them go. I mean, they can stop them and take, back whatever they're stealing. But if they make it out the door before you can do that, there's nothing they can do. I mean, they can take a picture of them, see if they can go out to the parking lot, get a picture of their license plate, and then send it to the cops who won't do anything.
Oh, yeah.
Well, in a lot of states, it is as the law is written, perhaps not as it's practiced, but I know in Colorado, if you observe somebody committing a crime, you directly observe them committing a crime, you can arrest them yourself. Citizens arrest, and it's pretty common in a lot of states on paper.
It's different when you're acting as an agent of a corporation, because there's all sorts of liability that just pops up in the middle of that.
Yeah, well, there's, it becomes legally gray, but I think it still stands. I think even if you are just the security guard, that still is a valid defense. And I don't think they have grounds to sue you if they were arresting you and you were proven to have committed a crime. So
going back to stuff like that, one thing, we hear stories about what they call like those flash mobs, where like a bunch of people show up to a convenience store and they rob the plate and they and they shoplift en masse and in such large number that nobody can do anything about it. and someone said it's simple. Let people carry guns and threaten them, and people are like, well, you're gonna shoot them over stealing candy bars and all that. To which I say, like, listen, we can argue whether or not that's appropriate force till the cows come home, but one thing I kind of agree on, and let's be honest here, if you are trespassing on property with the intent of doing something wrong, you kind of forfeit your right to not be attacked by the person who owns the place.
Yeah.
Well, to the
Yeah.
person who says, "Are you really going to shoot somebody over a candy bar?" I'd say, "Are you really going to steal a candy bar? Or do you
Yeah.
really care more about the candy bar than getting shot?"
Yeah.
I think Bill Cosby
Suppose-
I think Bill Cosby had a joke like that where it's like you see all these people saying you're gonna shoot that kid for robbing a candy bar. To which I say, why are you robbing a candy bar? It's only $4.
Right. Yeah, and the thing is, like, imagine a world where, like, not only were people allowed to shoot shoplifters, but people always did. Like, every time somebody like it does a smash and grab, they got shot. How long do you think it would take before uplifting went to zero?
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, yeah,
and
that's
it's,
another-
it's also not in any way.
as the moral position. I'm just saying that criminals will respond to different circumstances. They're not quite as
Yeah,
But
that's
it's
why
not
irrational as
anyway.
people
It's
would
not the
think.
victimless crime they make it out to be because, oh, you're just taking money from a corporation. No, you're raising prices for everyone else because
Yeah, and
that's the only
yeah.
way they have of making that back.
Yeah. Or even worse, especially if it's a smaller place, if you keep stealing, that person is going to lose. They're not going to be able to function anymore. They're going to be, well, I got to close up because I can't afford it anymore. And now, and then you're wondering, why some of these bigger cities are having a shortage of food because all the food manufacturers and sellers, they're leaving because people keep stealing
Yeah.
from them.
Yeah, all these cities
Yeah,
are wondering
yeah,
why
you
the
know, I
Walmart's
think-
pulling out. That's exactly why. It's just too much
Yeah.
shoplifting.
I think security theater should be illegal. Like, if you're going to put an armed security guard at the front of your store, he better damn well have the authorization to intervene and actually stop a crime in progress. Otherwise, you're just making it so that all of the other businesses that have armed security that are authorized to intervene, they're not going to appear as a real threat, and it creates a dangerous situation because
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
that's why I love those. That's why I love those anti-Second Amendment people say it's like, well, if the police can't be there for you, why don't you just hire security? Well, one, security is expensive, and two, and I've heard actual security officers say this, they can't do much. All they can do is, like what Shane said, all they can do is temporarily detain the person and say, hey, we got a trespasser, or a shoplifter here, and 90% of the time, the cops are just going to say, just give him a stern talking to and let him go.
We got a
Yeah.
couple
And they-
more from
no,
Fighting Zenithian, who I'm guessing lives in Louisiana because he's giving us names of bad sheriffs. I'm not going to read them out, but they're on your screen right now if you want to pause and read them.
Yeah, stupid French names. It's not even good French.
There's only
Yeah.
like a couple that are French, oddly.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can
Yeah.
probably do the same thing in any state if you look.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I find it so funny when some of those SJWs get offended because you can't pronounce their name and like they have like and like they're an African American and they've got that that Creole French name from Louisiana and it's like why can't you pronounce my name? It's like I can't even read regular French, let alone Creole
Yeah.
French. Yeah. Yeah, that's the reason why I can't
Well,
pronounce
you're
names.
just hey.
The
Well,
reason
that means that you're just a big O.
Well, they say, well, like, well, why can you read the names of all of the Europeans? So it's like, well, I'm having trouble reading names in like French and Icelandic and Norse
Yeah,
and things
have
like
you-
that.
yeah,
a lot of those
as-
give me
as-
trouble.
Yeah, remember that SNL skit, when they were talking about that volcano in Iceland? It's like the volcano known as but FIFAFO Yeah, like the
Oh,
only
just
You know,
try all of those like they have all sorts of pictures of like street signs in Wales where they're like just these tons of like DDRWBR, and they're like, can I buy
yeah,
a vowel?
there's a town in Wales
yeah.
that
I
has the
actually
like it's the longest, most garbled nonsense name ever.
I think there was I
I
think there was
couldn't
like
even
a
attempt to pronounce it. I just the last three syllables. Go go gork.
there was like a YouTuber that's from Wales that was doing a video on that, and people asked him, how come Wales like has all these weirdly named cities, and why some of these towns like have names that are like a million letters long? And he basically said, because the thing you got to remember is that the Welsh, the Welsh Celtics that were living in Wales before the Anglo-Saxons and later the Normans came along, we didn't have an alphabet system. We used runes to communicate.
Yeah.
And when we got conquered by the Normans, they decided, hey, you guys need to have an alphabet system. Here, but basically they did what the United States did with the Hmong people. They basically said, just tell us what your words are and we'll translate it to English, and we'll just write it literally how it's pronounced, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why the Hmong language looks so weird. It's because for the longest time the Hmong people didn't have a written language, so literally the US government just said, okay, here, just tell us what your words and vocabulary are and we'll just literally write them down what you're saying.
Well, guys, I think we're 6 minutes over, so it's probably
Okay.
about time to wrap this up unless you got any final thoughts.
Nope.
Nope.
All right. Well, thanks Forth and Scarface, and thanks Yuri for a very spirited discussion earlier. See ya, SKM. See you, everyone else, Ishi Gray, and everyone else who commented, and Fighting Zenithian over on Rumble. Good to have some views from over there. I don't know how many people are watching on Odyssey. No one commented there, but thanks
I
everyone.
have heard from around the grapevine that Rumble's slowly gaining more people because of what's been going on with YouTube.
Rumble seems to be doing better for live streams than for posted videos.
Yeah.
That just kind of seems to be the thing, but
Probably because as many YouTubers have pointed out, it's difficult to have live streams anymore because you can literally be demonetized just for a minor wisecrack, and you can't necessarily edit that out.
yeah, and they'll like cut you off in the middle of a live stream, and all of a sudden you don't have an account anymore, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll do that.
Yeah.
Makes it impossible. So that's why I appreciate everyone. Donate.pagosity.tv. No one gave us super chat, but still, it's cool. Maybe next time someone can make me dance. I'm just reminding you, though, that at sometime next month, the subscription tiers on Patreon and Subscribestar are going to go up. So if you want to get them at the lower price, make sure you sign up this month, because those will be valid for a little while. I don't really have a timeline on that. Hopefully just as everyone migrates to the higher tiers, but yeah, I hate having
thanks inflation.
Yeah, I hate having to, God, I hate it. I've never raised the prices, and I actually dropped the prices of the top two tiers back when things were looking a lot better, but that's where we are now. So make sure you get in if you want to get in lower tiers. So
Federal Reserve, stop printing money.
we'll see you, everyone. Stay strong.